My secretive husband was on a parenting variety show with a dragon and phoenix baby. And I secretly went to be the observer and flying guest of the program. The corners of his mouth went up like crazy during the program. As he was always a high-flying persona. He hugged his daughter every day and threw in snacks. Anyway, Mom is not here. You can eat. All you can eat. Good boy. He told his son who was entertaining himself next to him. Play by yourself. A man should be self-reliant and self-reliant. You are 4 years old. You are a little adult. Netizens teased him as a serious daughter slave. Until the day I went to the scene and taught them a lesson. The pop-up screen exploded. No, how can she come to the show and control others? What's her business with other people's kids? When public opinion peaked, 2 children came up and hugged me, pampering me. Mommy. Our favorite is always Mommy. It was a scene that silenced the entire internet. Philip, with 2 children on the parent-child variety show, did not think I would secretly go as an observer. He has been a high-cool persona for the past few years. But after appearing on this variety show, his persona seems to be gradually going in the direction of being uncontrollable. When he appeared on stage, he was holding his daughter Annie in his left hand and his son George in his right hand, with a fatherly smile on his face. The pop-ups are all praising. The first time I saw this was when I was a child. The pop-ups are all praising. Is this the twins? They look like each other. They are so cute. They are just the same as my brother. Smiling so favorably. It's true that being a father is different. Brother Feng's face has changed. What a cute kid. With a round face. Let Auntie give him a kiss. I hate that I can't get my mouth into the screen. How beautiful their mom must be. I heard she's a vegetarian and has been well protected for the past few years. In the hall, Annie is sleeping against Philip with her arms around his neck. He was gently coaxing him with hand pats on the back. His body shaking gently. Looking very experienced with babies. George came over from the side and called out. Daddy. Philip warned him with a look. Keep it down. Sis just fell asleep. Sis is too tired. George flopped down on the sofa and said. Daddy. Can you put me to bed later? I'm tired too. Philip blurted out. You're 4 years old. Can't you put yourself to bed? The pop-up screen was full of ha-ha-ha-thea. Meanwhile, on the other side, the observers in the observation room couldn't help but laugh out loud when they saw this. On the first day of broadcasting, everyone was praising the 2 of them for being cute. And the hot search went up several times. And this was one of the famous scenes. I looked calm on the surface. But I was secretly happy inside. Of course it's cute. Don't look at who gave birth to it. After the secret joy, I thought of something important. I spoke up and said, parents should treat their children the same. The netizens of the pop-up screen began to ask black questions. What's going on? I'm just watching a variety show to relax. Why is Wine still preaching? I can't see what's going on here. It's a bit of a big deal. Maybe Feng just favors his daughter. Maybe that's how they get along. Can you not comment if you don't know the whole picture? It's too early to draw any conclusions. Let's move on and see what happens. Because Philip is so close to his children. Many people say he's like a full-time dad. There are 4 families in this program. And this group of parents and children directly took 400. 0 votes on Weibo. Becoming the most popular group in the Weibo referendum. Many people came to see how Philip brought up his children because of his previous movie star title. And even wanted to learn some lessons. As soon as the live broadcast was turned on, it attracted countless netizens into the broadcast room. At this time, the screen cut to the living room. Annie and George were playing with toys. And Howard, a child from another family, walked over from the side and entered the camera. Howard was the oldest of all the children. Already 5.5 years old. He had an obese build that shouldn't be expected for his age. And his clothes looked like they were barely holding up. Like his pants were about to burst. But his features still looked cute. Annie glanced at Howard, and politely handed him a toy fruit. Do you want to play with us, brother? Howard sat straight down, took the toy and said with a smile, "Sure, I'll play with you guys." Inside the observation room, Wendy is the mother of Howard's family. She was not worried about their father and son appearing on the program together this time, so she came to be an observer. The pop-up screen started to say, "Howard looks so cute. He's so chubby. And he plays games with his siblings. This child has put on weight that shouldn't be there at his age. It's time to control his diet. Kids, it's good to eat. No need to lose weight. Health is the most important." Wendy looked at the pop-ups praising Howard's cuteness, so she couldn't help but tickle the corners of her mouth. "My child is not as multi-talented as other children, but he is still very good and obedient. Never let me worry." The other two observers cast envious glances and sighed in admiration. This scene seemed to be harmonious. But in the next second, when George showed the stacking block he had managed to build to Howard, Howard pointed at it and laughed out loud. "What kind of block is this? It's so ugly." Then he clenched his fist and punched the tall block straight down to the ground with a crisp, solid thud. The blocks that had been built for 2 hours were destroyed by his punch. Annie and George were baffled. The netizens were also baffled. Seeing this, Annie immediately put down the toys she was holding, stood up and blocked in front of George, with anger in her tender voice. "What are you doing? Why did you knock down his block? Do you know he's been building this for a long time?" George stared down at the collapsed block, secretly deflating his mouth and starting to get aggravated. But he didn't dare to cry out. He just silently picked up a block on the ground and touched it. Howard stood up, half a head taller than Annie. He looked down at Annie and made a face at them. "It's just ugly. Why don't you let people talk about it? What's wrong with knocking off ugly things? I saw you guys doing this from afar. It's so childish. I never play with these things." Annie frowned. "But you're the ugly thing, and we didn't beat you up." Howard's eyes wide and in disbelief. "You dare to call me an ugly thing? Do you know who my father is?" The pop-up screen began to fill with question marks. "I'm convinced. I've just finished complimenting you, and then I'm going to do this whole thing? Isn't this the kind of kid my relatives have? Damn. My blood pressure is skyrocketing this early in the morning. I felt something was wrong when he came over just now. My intuition didn't betray me. Annie is so brave. She even stood up to defend her brother." The atmosphere of the observation room suddenly became serious. Wendy didn't dare to say a word at this time. Just a very ugly face. The bickering between the children quickly spread to the parents. When Philip arrived from the kitchen, he saw George's red eyes, Annie's angry expression, and Howard's smug victory. He immediately guessed something was up. Only after Howard's dad came over did Philip ask Annie in all seriousness what had happened. And as she spoke, Annie burst into tears and kept wiping the tears from her own face. "He got his brother's block off. It's something his brother has been building for a long time." "Oh." Philip rubbed Annie's hair, and then picked George up from the floor. He hugged and comforted George first. "George, if you're being bullied, you must say it yourself. You can't just back down if it's someone else's fault. Okay?" George, who had just been holding back from crying, heard his dad's gentle voice. And only then did he lie on his shoulder and sobbed in a small voice. "Howard's dad is Tim, a popular comedian," Philip calmly said to Howard. How? You knocked down your brother's blocks. You should apologize to your brother." Tim held his own child back and instead of feeling sorry, he gave a laugh. "It's just a kid playing around. You're an adult." He sure didn't do it on purpose. For after Tim finished speaking, Howard immediately hid behind him and nodded heavily. The pop-up screen exploded. "I can't believe I can hear this kind of words on a parent-child variety show. Did I hear right? I'm drunk. It's really like having a father like a son, haha." The education model of their two families can be seen at a glance. I really didn't expect him to be this kind of person. Kids don't know how to play around. I have a bigger fist than he does. Send this kid to me, and I'll play with him for a while. Wendy still says the kid is well behaved. I really laughed. Philip, who has always had a loving fatherly smile on this show, instantly changed back to the cold face he once had. He repeated, "Apologize." Tim was a little bit unable to get down. "I've told you. It was a joke. You guys just can't take a joke. Can you?" Philip's eyebrows moved slightly. And he said to the cameraman, "Please help me pull up the footage of the shooting just now." The cameraman was standing not far away. His legs were shaking a little. Tim was stunned for a moment, as if he suddenly remembered that there was a camera filming this matter. His arrogance immediately went down by a large margin, and a pleasing smile appeared on his face. "Don't bother. I'll apologize on his behalf. Uncle apologized to you." "I'm sorry." "Ha, baby." George raised his head and looked at them with tearful eyes. Philip swept Tim a glance and said, "Whoever does something wrong apologizes. A child understands this. You wouldn't not understand. Would you?" Tim violently pushed Howard's shoulder at this time. Quickly. "Apologize." Howard then reluctantly said, "I'm sorry." Until this sorry was said, everyone in the observation room breathed a sigh of relief. Probably the other two didn't dare to offend Wendy and didn't say anything. My face at the moment was as ugly as Philip's in the screen. Wendy pretended to be relaxed and said, "It's this child. His temperament is too unstable. My fault. I will teach him well." I spoke with an expressionless face. In any case, it was really wrong for the parents to say those words. What would have been done if there was no camera to capture it? Wendy was dumbfounded by my question. That night, their entire family was on the hot seat. What kind of family raises a bare child? 5 after it was over, Philip hugged his two wee ones, a heartbroken expression surfacing on his face. George had recovered emotionally, and he swung his fist into the air a few times. "Dad, next time I'm bullied, I'll make him look good." I looked at the screen and hooked the corner of my mouth. Indeed, he has recovered. He has already started to brag. Annie just got tired of crying. At this time she was lying on Philip's shoulder. Philip said softly to Annie, "Annie is awesome. She will still defend her brother and be able to help each other. When you protect others, you should also pay attention to protect yourself. Understand? If there are any conflicts in the future, remember to talk to Daddy." The bear drama was over, and Annie and George quickly returned to their lively state. Before going to bed at night, Philip sent me a message. "Wine. What are you doing?" "I just put the 2 kids to bed. I heard you were traveling. Did it go well?" He sent over a few more pictures of Annie and George playing together and falling asleep, looking well behaved. I was in the hotel arranged by the program team at this time, just finished showering and lying on the bed. When I saw the message he sent me, I replied, "Everything's going well. I just haven't seen you guys for a few days. I miss you guys." "Philip, I miss you too. Every time I open my cell phone screen and see the wallpaper, I want to see you right away." He sent a selfie of him claiming a kiss at this point. I looked at the photo in front of the screen and couldn't help but laugh out loud. After so many years of marriage, he is increasingly letting go of himself, and the opposite of the high and cold image before marriage. The two chatted for a while. I reminded him a bit, "Don't let the kids get bullied inside. You know, Annie and George both have great personalities. Philip, don't worry your wife. I'm here. I won't let them be wronged." 6. The next day when the program was being filmed, the observers were making preparations. Just as I arrived at the scene, I heard a violent argument and seemed to be in a very emotional state. Slightly stepping forward, it was Wendy chatting with the staff. The assistant director and a few staff members were gathered around, listening to Wendy. Wendy clasped her hands in front of her chest and angrily said to them, "Don't you broadcast this program selectively? You're going to show that kind of footage from yesterday? Do you know how much this will affect my child? There are already hot search phrases on Weibo now, and netizens are cyber-storming us. Who will bear the consequences of the broadcasting errors you caused? The assistant director was silent for a while and said, "The main focus of our program is truthfulness. And we don't selectively broadcast good or bad images. This is something I told you from the beginning." Wendy heard her words being rebutted and became even more furious. Which child hasn't made mistakes? And by broadcasting this, aren't you not giving the child a chance to change his mistakes? Next time, if there's footage of how, please cut out the unintelligent ones. Can you? Cameraman, no way. This is a live broadcast. After several fruitless discussions, Wendy's attitude got worse and worse, and she finally lost her temper before giving up. I stood by the side and listened to the whole process. And the assistant director tearfully complained to me, if it wasn't for their family's investment in the program, how would they have invited such a young lady and young master to come here? But the hot opinion on Weibo is getting stronger and stronger, pushing them all to the center of the storm. Apologize are so tugging. A whole family are showbiz bullies. I don't want to watch them anymore. Can the director tell them to get out of the program? I saw Annie George crying like an old auntie's heart was broken. It's so hateful. Howard is a bear child, who has never been beaten up. If he grows up with this kind of character, he will be beaten up. 7A New Day begins with Philip being pestered by two kids. The scene cuts to Philip going in and out of the kitchen, making a love breakfast for the kids. The whole process of making it is organized. It looks like someone who cooks a lot. Annie watched the TV for a while, casually picked up the fried sesame flowers prepared by the program team on the table, and trotted over to Philip. She tugged at Philip, her voice soft. "Daddy, I want to eat this." I saw this scene in the observation room and knew Philip was about to fall again. What he can't resist the most is Annie's pampering. As long as Annie is pampered, Philip can pick the stars out of the sky for her. Philip finished frying the eggs, washed his hands and picked up Annie. "Yes. Daddy will open it for you." Annie hesitated for a while. Her little hands stirred together, but Mommy said she wouldn't let me eat these things before. Philip's brows relaxed. "Anyway, Mom is not here. You can eat them. You can eat them all. Be good." Annie then smiled and gave her dad a big kiss on the cheek. "Thank you, Daddy. Daddy is so nice." George on the side was amusing himself. He rolled around on the sofa and muttered, "Daddy, you always hug your sister. You don't even hug me." Philip's parenting model for his son was mainly a put-upon one. Not in the habit of kissing and hugging his own son like this. Go play by yourself. A man has to be self-reliant. You're 4 years old. You're a little adult," he said. The pop-up screen swiped the screen. Damn. I'm dying of laughter. This double standard is a bit too serious. Right. It's Annie who can. It's George who can't. I didn't realize that Fang is a serious daughter slave. His eyes are full of love when he looks at Annie. George is so aggrieved. "Come over to me. Auntie will hug you." I love Annie too. If she were my daughter, I would spoil her to the skies. I love both of them. They're both very understanding. The atmosphere inside the observation room was also very relaxed. Everyone was talking and laughing. I remembered something and said silently in the observation room, "Give her something like this that's easy to heat up. It'll inflame her tonsils." That was all I said. The entire internet began to pounce on me. The pop-up screen was flooded with curses. Isn't this wine a bit too arrogant? How does she know she'll get tonsillitis? Every child has a different constitution. You're not the child's mom. How do you know she'll get tonsillitis? Some people on the show are too lenient. Even if the child eats a twist. It's just a twist. Wine will take care of the child. Philip feels that he cares enough about his own child. It is not the turn of outsiders to point fingers. I was sprayed all over the place and made it to the top of Twitter. Wine cares too much. Wine get out of Variety protect our Philip, it's really a bit unfair. I just reflexively said that. Wendy said, "What's wrong with a kid having a snack? Not every kid gets tonsillitis. My how never gets it." He even ate a spicy Chongqing hot pot and was fine afterward. So don't be too hard on your kids. Sister Zhu. Right? She touched Yolanda's arm next to her and signaled her with her eyes. Yolanda froze for a moment and nodded. Ah. Right. I didn't say another word and continued to watch the live broadcast of the variety show. The online opinion now shifted from Wendy to me. True to form. Every variety show always had those who came out to be scolded at different times. And they even made it a point to come under my Weibo to scold me. Now, I've really seen the power of the internet. No wonder some female celebrities said that they were scolded even if they took a sip of water on the program before. 9 After a few days in the observation room, our status changed from observers to flying guests again. Coming to interact with them. Wendy was very excited to see Howard and immediately hugged him and spun around 2 or 3 times. However, Howard didn't seem to be too happy about it, and pushed Wendy away after the spinning. Howard was wearing a black vest and said to Wendy in a serious manner, "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. You still hug me like this." Wendy froze for a moment. How? Haven't you missed your mom for so many days? Once the guests came, they brought a lot of fun and delicious food for the children. And everyone was very exuberant. The daughter of one family was very polite. Her nickname was Chi-Chi, the youngest child. When Yolanda gave the doll to Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi turned her head to ask her mom if she could take it. And only after her mom smiled and nodded did Chi-Chi shyly take the doll, her fingers wrapping around her pigtails. She approached Yolanda and sweetly said, "Sister, you are so pretty. Thank you for giving me the doll. OMG. Trying to trick me into giving birth to a daughter again series. Chi-Chi is so sweet. Chi-Chi is really super tutored. Very polite and sweet-mouthed. She looks like a doll. Her features are too delicate. Where can I get a daughter like this? Southward. Because it's quite difficult." All the families in the villa were buzzing with excitement. Until the screen cut to me. I was looking for Philip and Annie George. Pop-ups floated by. Help. Why is she still there? Who is she looking for? Who's she looking for? Annie. George. Get away from her. It's okay. Family. Calm down. Philip has a bad temper. Wine will be in deep shit if she bullies them. Yes. Philip won't let Annie be bullied. Don't worry everyone. Have you forgotten what happened last time? At this time, Philip slowly walked out from the room. The first time he saw me, his face was full of shock. "What are you doing here? Aren't you on a business trip?" He walked up to me with a very surprised expression. I smiled. "What? You didn't want me to come? That's definitely not it. It's just a surprise." He took a step closer to me and looked to open his arms for a hug, which was blocked by my hand. I raised an eyebrow. "Wait. I'm here to torture you first. Did you forget the last time Annie ate fried food and got an infection? I saw it all. Why? You explain it to me." Philip took my hand and said, "I was wrong. I was supervising Annie's water intake." Annie and George ran out at this time, and immediately jumped up and hugged me. One hugging the left leg, and the other hugging the right leg. "Mommy. What are you doing here?" 10 The pop-up screen exploded. Wine is Philip's secret wife. Don't scare me. I don't have a good heart. I'm convinced Dad. Wine is Annie and George's mom. Did we scold the wrong person before? Laughing. So many keyboard warriors on the internet were scolding people before. Now come out and try to call another one. I go. Wine on really mama. Sorry before scolding a bit too much. Mr. John, I give you a kowtow. Wine looks a little bit like them. But they still look more like their father. No wonder Wine said at the beginning of the live broadcast that she wanted to treat her children the same. So it's because her mom doesn't advocate this practice. I looked down at Annie and George, who showed their 2 little heads and looked up at me with bright eyes. I stroked their heads and said with a smile, "Of course I missed you guys." The other guests immediately rushed over when they saw this and also expressed their shock. So Sister Zhang is Annie and George's mom. Why didn't you tell us earlier? This is the first time your story was revealed on the program. So it's great that the family of 4 is now reunited. Wendy was also baffled as she approached. No wonder you were so fiery with me in the observation room earlier. So why didn't you tell us earlier? I glanced at Howard, who immediately cowered behind Wendy. Howard whispered, "Bad auntie." Everyone looked at Wendy and Howard. Wendy immediately felt embarrassed and glanced at the camera. So she pushed Howard's shoulder. "How can you talk about auntie like that? It's rude. Hurry up and apologize to auntie." Howard frowned, feeling that he was being mean to his mom, and had a hard look on his face. He simply pushed Wendy away, made a face towards everyone and ran back to his room. Wendy stood still, anger rising up, being so angry that her chest rose and fell violently, even crying out in a hurry, striding towards their room, her voice taking on a sobbing tone. "Howard, get out of there. And I promise not to kill you." Howard locked the door to his room, and his mother knocked on the door, but did not open it. Wendy knocked on the door and cried at the same time. The pop-up screen burst of ridicule. Their children are not only angry at others, but also at their own moms. I don't think it's strange to teach such a child with this kind of home education model. It's too normal. Inexplicably feel very cool what happened. Wendy before is not very wild. Why don't you continue? Both parents are like this. Welcome to the birth of a bear child. Everyone in the hall is standing and watching. Chi-Chi drew to tissues at this time, jogged to Wendy's side, tugged on the hem of Wendy's coat, and handed the tissues over. "Auntie, don't cry." Wendy was stunned for a moment and crouched down to hug Chi-Chi. She shouted at the door, "All the other kids know how to feel for me, but you don't know how to feel for mommy." Chi-Chi clumsily wiped her tears. "My mom says it's okay to pass a tissue for someone when they're sad, even though you can't help." 77 The events of the last few days have been on many hot search phrases. Family differences. Divine love between parents. Mom bear being straightened out by a bear. Philip Wine. This parenting show is getting a lot of heat. Upon arriving on set, I couldn't wait to be around them all the time. Philip made a sumptuous dinner, and we sat around the table as a family of 4. Just as every day and cozy as we were at home before. Annie made an exaggerated while at the table. "Dad, why is there so much good food today?" Philip, wearing an apron, brought out the last plate of steamed fish and put it on the table. "Because Mom is here. Of course we have to make the best food for Mom." I couldn't help hooking my lips. The status of the family is immediately obvious. So Wine is the one who stands at the top of the family. Brother Feng is a good cook. He looks like he's studied at the New Oriental. All the dishes he made this time are hard-cooked. He must have been busy for a long time. Brother Feng is so sweet and gentle when he talks to Wine. I'm so high. What a cozy family atmosphere. I want to be born in a loving family in my next life. When I was young, I thought it was hard to be rich. But when I grew up, I realized it's even harder to have love. Suddenly I want to cry. I've always dreamed of this kind of family atmosphere. At the dinner table, Annie and George scrambled to share with me the events of the past few days, speaking more excitedly and loudly than one another. I was going to build a big castle for my mom, but my brother How broke it, they said. My brother was so aggrieved, and I even stood up to protect him. "Mommy, aren't I great? My sister is much braver than me. George will be so brave to protect my sister next time." "Thank you. You'll be braver than me." Listening to their conversation, I was inexplicably moved. The atmosphere in my family of origin was not good, and I never had warm exchanges at the dinner table when I was growing up. Not even any real concern from my parents. All they cared about was how much my grades had dropped, whether or not I had embarrassed them, and whether or not I had spent more than a set amount of money. My younger brother, on the other hand, could have it all. A super high allowance, Mom and Dad's concern, Mom and Dad's love, and my brother's cheerful and optimistic personality. He grew up being loved as if the whole world revolved around him alone. If I fell down on the road of growing up, no one would help me up. I could only rely on myself. Then I thought to myself, if I have a child in the future, I won't let him go through this. I want to be a hot air balloon of love on my child's path, giving him a warm place to come back to every time he feels cold. Only when you feel love will you feel that the world is beautiful, and the earth is worth it. 12 Philip watched them talk with a loving fatherly smile on his face, then smoothly pinched the ribs into Annie's bowl. When I saw this, I also took a piece of the same ribs to George's bowl. I praised, Annie, George are just as great. You will always be a proud mom and dad. Both of you. Philip immediately recognized what I meant. After dinner, I was going to help share some of the dishwashing duties, but I was stopped by Philip, who immediately grabbed the apron and quickly put it on. Honey, I'll do it. The water is cold these days. Normally, we basically share the chores at home. To be precise, he would grab a bit more, and I couldn't grab him, so I had to give up. I stood next to him, leaning against the kitchen door frame to watch him, and sighed. How can you be so nice? Without hesitation, Philip said, that still makes you better. Otherwise, how could someone as nice as me love you so much? A groundhog squawk floated past the pop-up screen. Aha HH. Help. I'm high as a kite. Someone kill me to cheer them up. I'm convinced. Dad. My worthless tears are flowing out of the corners of my mouth. How can you be married for years and still be so mushy? Is this real? Holy shit. Tricks between husband and wife. We netizens are also a part of your play, aren't we? Now that all the single dogs are unhappy, you guys are happy. Philip's words always surprise me infinitely. How he's getting better at talking. When I first started chasing him a few years ago, he was like a cold piece of wood. It seems that serious conditioning still works. He was washing the dishes when I hugged him gently from behind. Right. Philip. I know you are good to your daughter and don't want her to experience all the indignities I once suffered, and don't want her to feel that her brother has shared her love. But it's just as undesirable to prioritize your daughter as it is to prioritize your son. And it's important to give them more love. And as much as possible. The same amount. At least when Annie gets a piece of the chop, George should get one too. What do you think? Philip's hands paused as he washed the dishes, water running slowly down his hands. He pondered for a moment and nodded. I see. You're right. I'll keep that in mind, and I'll be sure to pay attention in the future. Then he spoke softly down. Because Annie is so much like you. Every time I see Annie, I always think of you when I was little. And when I'm nice to Annie, it's like I'm making up for the love you didn't get when you were little. I'm sorry. My eyes instantly became wet. The true feelings that Philip and I had for each other were all broadcasted live as well. What's going on? I'm always crying and laughing when I watch this program. And my mom thinks I'm crazy. Wine grew up in a patriarchal environment. And I seem to have gradually understood everything. Philip loves them. He's a pure love warrior. They are really good parents. In fact, Philip was the first to stand up for George when he was bullied, and constantly comforted him. He also loves George very much. Learned. I must pay more attention at home in the future. I seem to favor my son at home and neglect my own daughter. I feel so ashamed to hear her say this. After everything was done, I went out into the hall and saw all the children gathered and being asked questions. Annie and George sat nicely and listened attentively. Do you think you love mommy or daddy more? Some said daddy. Some said mommy. And Annie said, just as much. George added, but since daddy loves mommy the most, when you add it all up, mommy is the one we all love the most. All the parents in the room were marveling. What kind of a high IQ statement is that from a full-grade child? When Annie and George saw me walking that way, they immediately ran over to me and hugged me, saying as if they were pampered. Annie and George immediately ran over to me and hugged me, saying in a pampered manner, Mommy, Our favorite is always Mommy. Philip also came out and hugged us. In full view of everyone, Philip lowered his head and kissed me. And I was so ashamed that I almost wanted to find a hole in the ground. Wendy sat in the corner of the sofa, her eyes a little empty. She patted Tim, who was playing with his cell phone next to her. But Tim didn't even look at her. His eyes were full of impatience, talking about endorsements. Don't bother. Wendy lowered her eyes and didn't say anything else. Annie and George looked cute and well-behaved in their blue backpacks. And George had a hat on, like a miniature version of Super Mario. I took their hands and said, "There are swings in the corner of the garden outside. Let's go and play together." 14. Philip followed. We each held one of these two little ones. He hugged George and seriously apologized to him. "George, I'm sorry. Sometimes Daddy neglected you when he was taking care of your sister before. Daddy apologizes to you now. It won't happen again." George gently patted Philip's cheek with his little hand. "It's okay, Daddy. Secretly, I'm not angry. We men are going to take care of and protect our sister and Mom from now on." Philip raised his eyebrows and gave him a nod. "Not bad for my son." Annie and George were carried on the swing together and we swung them gently. The sound of Annie and George's laughter echoed in the moonlight. "Mom. It's so high. It's not enough. Faster. Daddy. I'm so happy." The tender words of a child can sometimes make you forget all the trivialities and worries of life. This swing is very sturdy and decorated with beautiful ribbons. If I had seen it as a child, I would have loved it too. People will always be trapped in their lives by things that are unattainable in their youth. The pop-ups have been swiping the swing gift on the platform. I envy Annie and George for growing up in such a loving family. I loved swinging when I was a kid. I couldn't move when I saw a swing. But unfortunately, I never even tried it a couple of times. And my parents always said it was dangerous and that I would fall off. Not to mention when I was a kid. I'm still in love with swings. They have a kind of magical power. It's like something out of a fairy tale. It's so nice. Annie and George got tired of swinging and ran back to the lobby to eat, holding hands. I was just about to turn around and leave when Philip pulled my wrist. He looked up at the moon. "Stay for a little while longer?" My feet stopped in place again, and I leaned my head gently against his shoulder. He lifted the corner of his lips. "Go up." "What?" "The swing. I'll push you." My face burned. "That's not good." He pressed me down on the swing and said, "At this point, just think of you as a little kid. This little friend. You haven't played on a swing before. Have you? Sit down." All my embarrassed words of refusal were stuck at the back of my throat. When I was seated, he began to push me from behind, my hair fluttering in the wind. Normally, I'm a very particular person about my hair. But at this point, I couldn't care less about my hair. All I remember is the excitement gushing up inside of me, more than every other moment of my life. He whispered softly behind me, "Whine. I will always stand behind you. All the regrets. I'll make them all up to you in the future."